Hello, my dear friends. It is I, Dave Makes Noises, back with some more story time for your sweet little poopers. But first, I just wanted to remind you to please check out our subreddit, r/MrRipper, if you're looking for where to post your stories. If you're a DM or player looking for a group to play with, please consider joining our Discord server, where more than 800 adventurers have already assembled, and some have already set off on a hero's journey of their own. Today's video is brought to you by our new sponsor, Dames of Asstoria, but we'll touch on that in a moment. For now, weary travelers, what was one character or characters concept that you never got to use? Part 1. So I had this fire genasi wizard named Dante that I was super stoked to play as in the next campaign, but I never got to play as for obvious reasons. I usually see a lot of unique characters on this subreddit, but I wanted to know if there were any characters that you guys wanted to use in a campaign but never got to for one reason or another. Does your monster girl waifu deserve a world of her own to toil in for great justice? Do you wish to guide her hand, tentacle, wing, tail on the ultimate quest for redemption? Dead Tree Studios' Dames of Asstoria puts you in the PG-13 pilot seat of a monster girl waifu of your very own design in a world where demifauna, animal half-gods, are treated as second-class citizens. But there is hope. As the ban on magic is lifted, many demifauna are discovering not only their innate potential, but their desire for adventure and renown. Do you have what it takes to be knighted a dame? For your monster girl waifu to make good on her name? Or will you go down in infamy as the greatest oppressor humanity has ever seen? Blaze your trail through epic quests, battles, and dungeons as you fight to earn the favor of the brave warriors who fought before you. Fight for the freedom of all waifu kind, and most importantly, roll some dice. Dames of Asstoria uses a D100 percentile system for combat and a D10 system out of combat. As mentioned before, you can play as a monster girl waifu of your design, or as a human for a more challenging gameplay experience. The multi-class system improves your waifu's abilities based on the skills that you develop along the way and encourages the mixing of perks and skills from different disciplines to unlock unique skills that are totally your own. If this sounds like your kind of tabletop adventure, Dames of Astoria's Indiegogo is live right now. The link is in the description. Get in while the getting's good. After all, the early harpy gets the worm. Thanks again to Dead Tree Studios for sponsoring this video. Please go show our friends some love. Now, back to the show. I have been lost into the role of perma-DM, but had a funny idea for a character. I watched a video about the abilities of deities, and it said using creation drains a lot of their power. I wanted to make a character who was a former deity, who used up all of their power, and everyone forgot them, and they are weak as a brand new humanoid, level 1. I thought it would be funny if they were either a fighter who has no affinity for any holy magic or regular magic, or a paladin who is his own deity slowly gaining minor power. I just think it could be funny or interesting to play. An evil character who isn't really evil. He just thinks he is, or tries to be and fails, sometimes accidentally doing good. Both his parents were evil wizards, and he wants to try to impress them, but his idea of evil is flipping off a kitten and running away. Are we talking like doing a backflip off of a kitten, or flipping a kitten the middle finger? Because if you're doing backflips off of kittens, that's probably pretty evil. I've always wanted to play as a rogue that makes his own tools, potions, etc. Basically a rogue artificer multi-class character that acts similar to Batman without all the angst, Geralt of Rivia, but I'm still quite new to the game and was told that the artificer class is too difficult of a class for newbies to play at first. Kinda requires a bit of homebrew, reason why he has yet to see a game, but I consider it fitting for the character. A hill dwarf barbarian named Hops Galderblood. Hops is just a normal tavern owner, and a young one at that, coming from a long family line of brewers and ale-slingers who have barely seen any real combat, though just after opening his tavern, the Hammered Tankard, he was drafted into a bloody war between his people and the orcs, having to leave his bar behind to defend his homeland. But his platoon's first assault on the enemy orcs ended with a slaughter, leaving Hops as the only survivor, with the aid of one orcish soldier who managed to find some semblance of pity. Now presumed dead by his nation, Hops travels the lands in hope of ending the war between the orcs and the dwarves, though not with a crusade of vengeance, but with one cold mug at a time. After seeing the horrors battle can bring, he believes most violence is unnecessary unless provoked, and often tries to settle differences over a pint or two, hoping to bring peace to both sides with what he knows best, drink. But when drink isn't enough, he is ready to fight, often going into a drunken fury fueled by his PTSD, swinging a massive warhammer and tossing tankards like a true bartender. As soon as the war is over, he'll settle down somewhere and finally reopen his tavern to continue his true passion. Where the homebrew comes in is the Path of the Brewmaster subclass, which can be found on D&D Beyond. I'd also like to take the Tavern Brawler feat for flavor or Magic Initiate so he could just make tankards when he runs out via prestidigitation, but he could always just wear a bandolier of tankers instead. With the subclass feature Drunken Fury, allows you to make a weapon attack with a tankard as a bonus action, he could throw them at people to keep ranged attacks as an option and to serve up drinks right to an enemy's face.
1 pint of ass whipping, coming right up.
Olek is a half-elf wizard. He is pretty normal, but he does not have any legs. My idea is that he lost his legs in a battle, and in that same battle, he had saved an orc, so the orc has sworn allegiance to the half-elf and is now carrying him on his chest with a baby backpack. Also, did I mention that the orc doesn't have his dominant arm? A storm-chasing Duergar Tempest cleric named Dreary, who thought the gods blessed his airship when he went through 5 hurricanes and him and his ship came out unscathed. All the other crew members died. So he lives with survivor's guilt and chases storms to rectify what happened. Each time the gods bless him. Eventually he grew bored trying to chase every storm. Then one day, he heard that many adventurers get mangled and killed. His god imbued him to set forth. His god promised him that if he fought with valiance and didn't try to kill himself outright, there would be a heroic time where he is killed in action. Dear Dreary may have had a dreary life with dreary weather that couldn't kill him, but he is a proud man. He has a note on him at all time. Quote from Magician's TV show or similar quote.
Did I do something brave? Or did I finally figure out how to kill myself?
A Warforged Warlock of the Archfey. They were used and abused by an adventuring party, and when all of them went into the Feywild, they got slaughtered. The Warforged lay abandoned for decades. But eventually a Fey lady took pity on it and animated it again, giving it Warlock Powers. I wanted to play an evil cleric who was an evangelist and a politician, constantly meeting people, shaking hands, and kissing babies. He'd be disarming to the point where he could just walk up to you, place a hand on your shoulder, or stick his hand out for a greeting, and you'd never suspect that he was about to use that physical contact to deliver touch spells and cripple or kill you outright. Manners and appearances are important to most people. It's rude to turn down a handshake or recoil from someone who's acting friendly. He'd weaponize that urge to appear polite and abide by social norms. I'm relatively new to D&D, but I'm loving it all so far, and character creation is my jam! I made a Minotaur for a one-shot, which might continue at some stage. It was basically a real cowboy. He's got spurs on his hooves, a huge Stetson with his horns poking through the brim, and a massive duster with a crossbow on his hip. Backstory is that he was kept as a slave for orcs for many years as a calf, until he and his people revolted and murdered their tribe of captors. Since then, he has been wandering the lands, freeing any and all who may be in captivity. This led to a couple of tense standoffs when we found a satyr who had charmed a temple. My Minotaur considered this as enslaving their minds and wanted to kill him, or at least break his fingers, but most of the rest of the party and an important NPC we were rescuing didn't like the idea, to say the least. He also just has to check out any farm or animal salespeople to see if the animals are being treated right. This led to Joe's camel rentals being practically broken into in the middle of the night. Camel Protective Services deemed the camels as well kept in the end, and satisfied with the stable they were kept in, stayed the night. Joe was less thrilled. He was fun, but only used in a one-shot. At least I could bring him back for something else soon, so long as he doesn't brush against the rest of the party too much. Sounds like a great NPC, to be honest. So this is one of the first characters I've properly made for D&D, maybe even the very first, technically. I rolled my stats and decided they'd fit Rogue best, and then saw Tiefling and realized Assassin Demon sounded awesome. He was somewhat well known by other bandits and the law, as he had a high bounty. I had some space in my skills and decided to give him some magic. At the time, I loved summoners, and so I had wanted him to be able to summon. It was all completely homebrew, as no one knew what we could or couldn't do. I made him to be able to summon creatures from teeth. He'd take regular teeth and enchant them into all sorts of accessories to buff his abilities. If he ever ran out, he'd simply take them from whoever he ran into next. Thus, I dubbed him the Mouthenary, as a combination of mouth mercenary, which, in my opinion, would make a pretty interesting NPC if I find the chance to. So one of my friends was setting up a campaign where 3 out of 4 players wanted to go for kobolds in different varieties. My idea was for a kobold artificer inventor, Blooper Soot Snoot. So the concept for my inventor is that he would be a comic relief kind of character, being covered in grime and God knows what most of the time, and or waking everyone up during rests with exploding. and malfunctioning gear. The main goal for me as a player was making other experiment player characters cool. The kobold features we were going with had the grovel, cower, and beg feat, which meant that as an action, you could distract foes, which gives all allies advantage on enemies within 10 feet of you. So one example to play up the others is that he would run straight into combat, and if he rolled poorly the previous round or one of the teammates' gear malfunctioned, he would start cowering and crying,
"It's not my fault! Inventoring isn't easy, you know! Don't laugh! Nobody laugh at this!"
while fidgeting with his gear in tears. I had a whole repertoire of scenes, gadgets, etc. written down and was amped. But unfortunately, I missed Session 0 and got my own campaign running as a DM. 2 years later, and I am still waiting for the right campaign for this character. I wouldn't say this is a character/concept I haven't gotten to use, rather that it hasn't gotten to shine in the way it was originally intended. Not that I have any issue with the campaign I'm using it in. Well, I'll explain. I've spoken of this before, but since then I've workshopped it a bit more, in hopes of making it more viable from a lore standpoint. Warning! This is a long read. If it exceeds the character limit, I'll break it up into 2 parts. Hope no one minds it. It's been bouncing around for a while. In Eberron, rising from the last war, we got Warforged and Artificers canonized. Now, of course, I'm sure I'm not the only one to take the 2 concepts and put them together, because a sentient golem with magic is pretty fun. Anyways, enter Glaive, a Warforged created towards the end of the period that they were being made, prior to the Mourning and Treaty of Thronehold shutting down all known creation forges, important for later. Born with a body and spirit more attuned to that of the magical arts associated with being an artificer, he ended up training as a part of House Kenneth, and through means still unclear, ended up either being outside of the Mourning's reach when it went off, or simply walked out. Not a big deal, but important, sort of. During all this, he became an archaeologist, namely being interested in exploring the ruins left by the long-ago Goblinoid Empire, and learning what he could about them, what House Kenneth was working on the day of the Mourning, and perhaps unravel the Mourning and why his people are immune to it. All rather normal stuff for an adventurer, right? Well, Eberron's book also has a section on religion, and while it is noted that Warforged are generally more spiritual than religious, likely due to their artificial origin and overall lack of rights in most societies, it doesn't say they can't lean towards religion. In fact, there's a part that allows for a character to create their own religion, casting off Eberron's main set of deities, and this is where Glaive starts to shine. During his research into past civilizations, he would have uncovered evidence of a foreign presence on Eberron, beyond even what the Goblin Empire fought, beyond even the Overlords. An alien deity who was able to break past the barrier around Eberron, and briefly at some point in the deep past, founded some sort of cult. Cult in the classic Greco-Roman sense, not in the Dragon Below sense. Key difference. Now, why is this a big deal that he found this cult? This cult, which originates from around the time that the golems that later inspired the Warforged were created, depicts being akin to Warforged in surviving artwork. Now, Glaive at this point isn't a pacifist, but unlike the Lord of Blades, who desires to bring about basically a nuclear war to secure the rights of Warforged, he isn't, well, a radical war leader. And so, unknowing of the dangers that could be implied about a foreign deity briefly punching a hole through the ring around Eberron, Glaive sets off to find a temple of this deity in hopes of convincing them to save his people. Alongside this, Glaive seeks a way to ensure that the Warforged at least have a net positive growth in their population, even if small, as currently, without an active forge, the Warforged are a dying race. So, along the way, he'd seek a way to build a new creation forge, away from the 5 nations, in order to, even if he fails to find them a deity to worship, at least give them some hope of carrying on. Either way, this sets him up to be in direct conflict with not only the Lord of Blades due to clashing ideologies, but also sets the stage for larger conflict with various religious groups, and even a few secret societies, like the Dragon's Secret Cabal, and the various humanoid groups. This hasn't yet gotten a chance to shine, mainly due to the fact that in the 2 games Glaive/the cult appear, the circumstances aren't ideal. Don't get me wrong, I love both games, but in one, Glaive was transported to another realm, perhaps one beyond Eberron's cosmology, with no way home, and in the other, Glaive is nowhere to be seen, and it's set in the Forgotten Realms, where the Warforged exist in an alt future that's the result of dragons conquering Toril after the 2 planets merge. Currently, I'm not in a game that would let Glaive explore his feelings about his people and their troubled future, but that's fine. TLDR, Wholesome Warforged seeks new religion for his people while also seeking a way to secure the means of production. This isn't the only idea I have, just the most fleshed out of the 10 or so. Alas, being the main DM for my main playgroup sucks. Hello, weary traveler, and thank you for saving us an attunement slot on your already stacked character sheet, and indeed for attuning to the very end of this video. Just wanted to extend another thanks to our sponsor for today's video, Dead Tree Studios. We're super excited to see what happens with Dames of Asstoria, and all the which waifu is best waifu arguments that are sure to come with it. Friendly reminder to please check out our streams on Sundays and Wednesdays, 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern, 10 p.m. GMT. If you're a DM or player looking for a gaming group, please check out our Discord server. Over 800 members and growing rapidly every single day. It's really exciting to see so many people finding their group and jumping into the world of D&D. If you feel the sudden urge to support the channel, please feel free to peruse our merch store. And if you feel the urge to support me, you can check out my website, www.davemakesnoises.com. If this is your first time here, please say hello in the comments. If you've been around a while, tell us about your waifu. I hope you are practicing being present this week. All we have is now. Please sub for Nat 20s. We love you over here at Rip Daddy's house. Thanks again for hanging out, and we will see you tomorrow.